All right. Good evening and welcome to everyone here on this November 10th, 2025 cold and snowy Committee of the Whole meeting of the Village of Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Elishabaz?
Here.
Trustee Freed?
Here.
Trustee Renner?
Here.
Trustee Ryder?
Here.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the non-agenda items and visitors for public comments. The Committee of the Whole allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the Committee of the Whole is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Please state your name and your address, Peter.
Peter White, 400 East Sheridan Place. George Russell came and did a nice presentation. I think it was prior to the trustee meeting 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to point out a couple things for the trustees to consider. He was out there on or about October 19th or 28th, something like that. And he had his pole out there indicating a 40-foot shadow. And all the trustees were pretty latched onto that pretty strongly. As I was reviewing the presentation, I got to thinking that that's well past the summer season. Little research showed me that the sun, and we'll use the summer solstice as a benchmark, is approximately 25 degrees higher in the sky. So that 40-foot shadow on June 21st would actually, if you do the math, building height over the tangent of the solar altitude, gives you a 20-foot shadow and not a 40-foot shadow on June 21st. And obviously, up until the sun reaches its zenith in the sky, there is no shadow to the east. There is a shadow to the west. So just please keep that in mind and don't latch onto this 40-foot benchmark that George gave you. And from my perspective, any enclosed structure that's used exclusively for a private organization on the beach without compensation to the village, I wouldn't support. So I'll let you guys hash that out, but that is a private beach. I'm not saying no structures, but what I am saying is discount that 40-foot shadow because nobody's down sunbathing at the end of October, at least, and no sane person. And in terms of what kind of structure ends up there, I'll leave it to you guys, but the public beach and should be open to the public or made available to the public if there is an enclosed structure. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you, Peter. Thank you. Any more comments online, Drew?
No.
Thank you. Going forward, next item is our general business. The Committee of the Whole will entertain requests from anyone present to modify the order of business to be conducted. We have 2 items today, and I don't believe that would matter here. And our first item next is the consideration of the minutes of the September 29, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any changes to these minutes? I do not see anybody asking for changes. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda for tonight is a discussion regarding possible village action in response to immigration enforcement and related matters. Drew?
Yeah, at the last village board meeting, October 27th, there was a conversation that was started under your report, President
Yeah.
Charlo, around this topic and what might the village do, if anything. And in the committee of the whole packet, there is a memorandum from Peter Friedman's office regarding this, as well as some high-level notes regarding relevant legal issues, as well as some other potential items that could be related. I think the goal tonight was to continue that conversation and to start off with the village attorney kind of giving this overview of relevant legal matters.
So the memo that we said we would provide a memo that tried to do two things. One, just give the basic legal framework that we find ourselves in with regard to immigration enforcement actions. And two, a summary as to the best we can, because it is a changing landscape. But I think we're pretty much up to date of what other municipalities or government entities have done under the same laws that we're operating under. So I'll just start with a real quick summary of the law. The two most important parts of this are the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and the anti-commandeering provisions of the Constitution. And what that generally means is that what the federal government hasn't done explicitly or in the Constitution is reserved to the states. And the anti-commandeering provision says that the federal government cannot compel states and local governments to provide resources, personnel, property, equipment, et cetera, in support of disfavored or whatever federal policies. The state and local governments control their own forces and personnel, and the federal government can't compel those resources in order to implement a federal policy. And so that's what we have with regard to the immigration enforcement activities. Illinois, along with many other states, I don't know the exact count, but Illinois is certainly not alone, has enacted sanctuary statutes, which in ours is called the Illinois Trust Act. It was amended by the Way Forward Act. Both of those combined are still kind of referred to as the Trust Act. And those were under those, the state government has declared, and this applies to all local law enforcement agencies or officials, include home rule, non-home rule, county, force, everybody, restrictions on the ability to engage in support of federal immigration enforcement in the state. Most specifically, local law enforcement agencies cannot detain or continue to detain any individual solely on the basis of an immigration detainer or civil immigration. So we're talking about civil immigration matters. Criminal matters are different. Local law enforcement agencies cannot stop, arrest, search, or detain a person solely based on the individual's citizenship or immigration status, cannot deny services based on immigration status, cannot share information, again, with regard to individual immigration status in relation to a civil proceeding, et cetera. And those are the key ones are listed in the memo. On the other hand, nor can the local and state law enforcement deliberately interfere with federal immigration enforcement. There is a federal statute. There are, federal immigration laws, and the federal government has the right to try to enforce those. So the two government entities, the federal and the state and the local, are, with regard to civil matters, separated a little bit in their cooperation and in their sharing and in their ability to control each other, which is, as the Constitution laid out and as the anti-commandeering and the Illinois Trust Act kind of is consistent with. So based on all of that, over the last, 2 months, when the administration announced its current immigration policies, a number of municipal or enforcement actions a number of municipalities and local governments have adopted or enacted or implemented various policies. And these, I think, can be broken down. One, some municipalities adopted an ordinance or a resolution. Others did it by executive order. North Chicago did it by executive order. Many others adopted actual legislation. And some have done it through city manager administrative orders. So all of those are possible. There's some distinction there depending on what type of local government you are, but one way or another, these policies have been implemented or adopted. The principal one that communities have enacted are restrictions on the ability to use municipal property or village property or whatever the government is for anything other than its intended purpose, and specifically excluding civil immigration enforcement, including staging areas, processing locations, operations base. That all started to come about by, there was an example in Oak Park, Broadview, of course, where federal immigration officials literally, at least with regard to Oak Park, had a van or an SUV or some equipment situated at a village hall parking lot for an extended period of time, like an operations base, processing location, staging area, et cetera. So we advised, and other local governmenters advised, that's where the anti-commandeering provision comes in, because that's local government property being commandeered for, to set up staging areas. The distinction there is, and this is where the law is not clear, that the local governments don't have the right to prevent the federal government and ICE from operating on the streets, operating on sidewalks, regular operations. That we can't prohibit, but we thought that's different than a extended setting up of operations on village property that's clearly not intended for that use. It's intended for the use of the public to park and use the village facilities. So based on that, almost all of the municipalities and local governments that have enacted something have enacted that restriction. That's the most common and really the most concrete act that the local governments have enacted to date. There's other things that they've done as well, and some have done it, some haven't. They've specifically authorized barriers and signage to inform and give notice of any restrictions. Some of them have specifically applied the Trust Act to all employees of that city or village, not just the local law enforcement officers and officials that the Trust Act explicitly includes. Many of them, I just went through the Trust Act restrictions. Many of them restate those restrictions as an ordinance or a resolution or a policy of the state. That's not really adding anything to the law, but it is expressing a policy position with regard to the Trust Act and the desire that it be followed. I think Wilmette also suspended state enforcement of the requirement that businesses performing landscaping work obtain a village landscaping business license, and state enforcement of the requirement that construction permits be displayed through December 30, 2026. So Wilmette did that. I haven't seen that in other communities, but that's kind of how nitty-gritty some of these are getting.
How is this helpful, by the way? Sorry to stop you, but how is this that you license a landscaping business helps in this matter?
I think it's to not require somebody who may be the subject of an ICE enforcement action to be forced to come to Village Hall and get a license to be in public and come to a public space. I think that's the purpose of that.
Okay.
And the other thing I would note, so all of these regulations, various regulations, the one thing to note is the enforcement issue, which is not an easy issue. If, for example, the restriction on the use of village property or city property for staging, for immigration and civil immigration enforcement. So if there's a violation of that, if the federal government, ICE, is doing that in the face of a local regulation that prohibits it, it's not clear that the village or whoever that is, well, it's not, it is not allowed, we don't think, for the village to try to arrest the ICE official. What we're talking about here is a violation of our code, or the local government code, and then enforcement of that ticket or violation in court. In federal court, first a fine and then seeking an injunction, but that's not an immediate solution if it's going on. So to the extent that enforcement goes on and on and on, it does lessen the effectiveness of the specific regulation. There's been some anecdotal circumstances that seem like these types of restrictions are being complied with. So that means that they're effective for what they're trying to do. But to the extent that they're not, the enforcement issue is challenging because it's the federal government. And I'll stop there and take any questions you might have.
I have a question, Peter. Throughout the memo and in your comments just now, you refer to civil immigration enforcement. The civil appears multiple times. Is there a distinction you're making? Is there such a distinction as criminal enforcement?
Yeah, and the chief can probably have comments too. The Trust Act only applies to civil immigration enforcement activities because criminal, we are required to cooperate with the federal government on criminal matters.
I'm very interested in that because I had heard, and I'm not following this as closely as I ought, but that the federal government considers being here illegally as a crime. And so therefore, I guess we ticket them and we fight about that later. Is that the notion?
Correct. And they may consider it a crime, but depending on what they cite somebody for, I mean, in the federal immigration statutes, there are certain things that are criminal and there are certain
see.
civil immigration matters.
I see.
There are two, because they can go, and this is, ICE has often, when they're coming into a building, will prevent an administrative warrant, which is civil. They go to their own
I see.
internal judge. Criminal, they'd have to go to court and get,
Interesting.
and that needs to be complied with.
That's interesting. So, Chief, maybe you
Yeah, so
considered
as
this.
much as I can explain this to you in legalese is, versus getting a criminal warrant versus a civil warrant.
I
And
think-
I think
okay.
Peter explained it very well. Where we're not bound by the civil side of this, right? And that's what we don't do under the Trust Act. When things become a criminal warrant and it's entered in leads, and we have to act upon that, then we have to act upon that differently than civil warrant.
I see. Okay. That's very helpful.
I have a
What-
question for you, Peter. In your, in the description of this document, and this is my ignorance, but let's say we take an action. Can we make it that this is the government is the village board or the village of Lake Bluff, or can we make an action that is all governments in Lake Bluff, that is including school and Park District? Can what we say apply also in terms of green spaces to other governments in the village?
We can only issue this with regard to village property.
Okay,
Park District has their own property and they control their own property.
thank you.
With regard to prohibiting ICE from setting up staging areas, it's our property that we can set that for. The park district or school district would have to do the same, and they can do the same.
Rafik.
Hey, Peter, thank you for that. A couple of things. So first off, I wasn't here at the last meeting when we had a discussion. So I want to thank Trustee Hatch for communicating some of my concerns and voices of some of my opinions. So I have several questions here for you, Peter. First and foremost, we've received a lot of emails from residents in our community asking about what are we going to do to protect village resources, personnel, or what are we doing to prohibit the use of village resources, personnel, other assets, and property? So this ordinance talks about property. Am I missing something in here about personnel, other assets, and resources?
No, other than we have to follow the Trust Act.
Okay.
So, and we do. So that's, the Trust Act doesn't, the issue about the property, there was a specific circumstance where that was happening, and it was felt like it was, it wasn't that the municipality was worried that they were assisting ICE, even though some probably made that argument that by allowing ICE to use the village parking lot to stage, that was a violation of the Trust Act. So the response to that was, we're going to prohibit it, to make it clear. Otherwise, but there's, I mean, I mentioned that some municipalities are restating the Trust Act in their resolutions or ordinances or executive orders. That's kind of belts and suspenders, right? Because the Trust Act applies and requires compliance to every government official, every local, every law enforcement official for sure, regardless of whether the local town adopts something that says they'll comply.
But the city of Highland Park extended that to village employees as well.
As did others too. That's what I was saying. And we don't know. I mean, that's aggressive's the wrong word. That's a very broad reading of the Trust Act, because the Trust Act, as I said, talks about local law enforcement officials. And the way that's defined is officials that are required to enforce local code. Well, in our, in Lake Bluff and many others, the police are not the only ones involved in code enforcement. It could be the administration, it could be the public works director, so that's why they said the odds of that issue ever getting challenged seems pretty minor. So they just wanted to make a statement that citywide, village-wide, whatever, we're all complying with the Trust Act.
Thank you. A few more questions. In your memo, you call out DHS and ICE specifically. In the draft ordinance, there's no mention of any enforcement body. It just is vague, and maybe that's strategic. So want to ask, would this apply to any enforcement agency in the state police, National Guard, anybody conducting enforcement beyond ICE? And if I'm missed something or if I'm incorrect, please correct me.
I mean, immigration enforcement is a federal issue, so the state doesn't have immigration laws. So you're right, it doesn't say that, but that's really the only entity, government entity, that's carrying out civil immigration matters.
Have we seen examples of the National Guard supporting that mission? And would this apply to them or only ICE?
Mm.
And
No, it would
should
apply, no, any,
anybody?
correct. It's the use of our facility for civil immigration officials. It's very broad. It does not specify by whom.
I just have a few more questions, and I'm looking at some of my notes here. So you did define the difference between criminal and civil in this situation. And I understand just now that the government is saying that all of these things are defined as criminal. So did I hear that wrong?
You didn't hear it wrong,
Okay.
but I understood incorrectly. I mean, I think there's two avenues is what you're saying, a civil immigration enforcement and a criminal immigration enforcement. my knowledge is of news reports
Sure.
where it's defended as all criminal activity, no matter where the enforcement mechanism stems from. I don't know that ICE is saying, never mind that this is civil, it's all criminal. I'm not saying that.
Mhm.
My knowledge is much more broad than that and certainly not that specific.
Okay, thank you. Peter, my next question is timing. Is this in perpetuity? Are we making an ordinance change forever, or is this for a certain amount of time?
Entirely up to you.
Does the ordinance highlight that distinction at all?
No.
And then my last question is going back to your original comments about executive orders or ordinances or laws.
Yeah.
Why not do an executive order? What's the drawback? What's the difference?
So enforcement is probably the difference. It is much easier, judges understand better if we're going in on a ticket violation of code section blah, 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 other than violation of this executive order document. And so the other thing about the executive order is you'll all remember from COVID that there are rules about what in our case, the village president can and can't do via executive order, and under what circumstances that power can be exercised. There needs to be an emergency. There needs to be a declared emergency. And that declared emergency has to be re-upped pretty regularly. And so procedurally, it's a little bit more clumsy. And the ability of the board to enact this ordinance is not, there's not a precondition that there be some emergency declared.
Got it. Okay, so I have no more questions for you, but I just want to share some of my thoughts with the rest of the board. So I think that this draft ordinance is missing a few things. It does not address village resources. It doesn't address village personnel explicitly. It doesn't address other assets that we've been asked as a community to address. It also doesn't address the timing piece. So I would, I'm not sure I have a stance on any of those things, but I'd like to see us at least address what we're going to do with our personnel, our resources, our other assets. So we have an answer for the community, and then define timing. If it's perpetuity, then that's what it is. If it's for 30 days, then that's what it is as well.
Thank you, Rafi. Other comments on the board? Got Brian.
Peter, I had a question. I had oral surgery, so I can barely talk.
Oh.
But when you talk about enforcement, it's not that you're saying that the police officers can't, like if they start staging on a village property, that the police can't go over and say, you know, we have this ordinance and that we don't want you on our property, correct?
Correct.
I just want to
Yep.
make sure.
And some communities in their ordinance and resolutions have authorized the police or the village manager or whoever to place signs on village property. So there's notice, because if there is ever an enforcement action, the more notice we have given about our prohibition, the better. So that whoever we're enforcing against can't say, I didn't even know this rule existed.
Thank you, Kat. Just as an engineer asking legal question here, you talked about other entities, other governmental entities or other property in Lake Bluff. To a certain extent, we do regulate the use of other properties. The park district can't erect a circus tent with big lights and leave it there, right? They can't burn leaves. They can't do this. They can't do this. They're not permitted to do this. So maybe it's just a fine legal question for you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a good question. And I can look into this too more. I know there's virtually certain there's no case on that circumstance regarding immigration activities. You're right, we have zoning authority. This is a little different, it seems to me, than zoning authority because it's only going to apply to their property. But I can look into that and be more
I'm
definitive.
just saying,
about
it's not like federal land where we can't say anything.
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yep.
Susan?
I would like to take action on this before it becomes an emergency. And so, I appreciate that the ordinance has been drafted. Any ordinance that we pass can be revoked when it's no longer relevant. And so I'm not unduly concerned about having no sunset built into it. But if we were to build one in, I would say it goes at least a year, if not 3 years and 3 months, roughly. So I'm not concerned about it having no sunset, that being up to us when it no longer becomes relevant. I would like to identify, I think, in the ordinance, to the extent we're not going to, well, we're not voting it today. So what I would be interested in seeing, and interested in other people's ideas about this, is the application of the Trust Act to all village employees explicitly, rather than leaving it to interpretation. I'd be interested in that. I'd also be interested in resources such as what Rafi was mentioning. Maybe that is implied, but I think it would be worth identifying as broadly as we can what we're saying we're not going to contribute to the effort. And then I did notice that we are authorizing the village manager to create signs. I think, and to take other action as may be necessary to enforce. I wouldn't think that we would want to proactively put signs up saying no ice allowed, but I'm glad to see that we would authorize that should it become necessary. I do think, though, that community members who might want the signs would be helped by having a single sign that they knew was legally permissible. And I think that is in there as something he's authorized to do. I'm curious if we have an interest in having him actually do that, rather than have each business owner who might want to do that need to go out and retain their own counsel or copy somebody else's that they believe has gotten counsel. I guess there's safety in numbers. I would like to know that we're doing something similar to the other municipalities, and I'm sure our business owners who are interested in this might be similarly interested in that. I think those are my only comments.
Can you comment on that C of section 762 that lists that Trustee Ryder was talking about, the providing property owners, that was a Skokie, the little Skokie had that?
Yeah, Skokie and a couple others. And I mean, Susan, Trustee Ryder just identified the issue. And I don't know if this was Skokie, but another town provided signs or was about to provide signs, and they were an inaccurate statement of the law. And that we don't want to, nobody wants to misstate the law on a sign that's provided by the village. But the other issue there is if the sign is not, by the book, what the law is, then it could be viewed as a political statement. And if it's viewed as a political statement, now we've got a First Amendment problem, because now we can't stop the next person who wants us to issue a political statement. So the sign itself is there are towns that are doing it. They're making very sure that they're, the message is very black and white and clear and kind of indisputable.
Right. I can fully appreciate what you're saying, and certainly wouldn't want to be making a political statement. I think making a specific statement of what the law is would, for those business owners, and maybe even non-business owners, maybe even private residences, might want to have that spelled out so that they knew that there was such a sign. If the law is too gray on this, then we don't want to step into it. But if there is such a sign that is black and white and not political, I'd be interested in providing
Regis.
it.
Yeah.
And that's my full.
Thank you.
To that point, just a similar, there is, by the business owner's decision, put up no guns signs, right?
Mhm.
And those are of a certain format, of a certain standard,
State
right? For
statute.
Illinois.
Yeah.
under-
State statute.
Just to bring up a similar
Yep.
example.
So I,
Based on, they have to put it up. It's just available.
thank you, Brian. So to this effect, and I would like to hear from Shannon and Taryn. We started this conversation with basically due process, respect, dignity, and general welfare of our population. That's where we started 2 weeks ago. So we kind of talked about it. In the document provided by Peter, there is the possibility of enabling our village manager to refer a different abuse to the Illinois Accountability Commission. We haven't talked about that. And signage was one thing, trust tax was one thing. So what do you guys think? Taryn and Shayna.
I'm not gonna jump in right now because I arrived late and I am enjoying listening to the conversation. I also shared a lot
Mhm.
about my support. I had a really fruitful conversation with Rafi earlier today where he pointed out that at our last meeting, and I need to go back and watch, but I wanted to be very clear about why I support doing this. But also, I will always put the village first, and I don't. Rafi highlighted that I might have said something along the lines of not caring if the village becomes a target. And that's certainly not how I feel. And I want to make sure that's clear today, which is I want to be thoughtful and impactful with whatever we do in our messaging and in our signage, while balancing against the interests of the village. So that's all I'm going to say for now, though.
Okay. Thank you. Shayna, if you have comments.
I'm supportive of the same suggestions Susan made, and I continue to support moving forward with this.
So from listening to you all here, I think we're aligned to, we need to have a message coming out. The thing I hear is we have a bunch of options. We have a bunch of ways of expressing. I don't think we're going to change the world. But we are definitely, but this is a way to project the fact that this is symbolic. This is the fact that one thing we didn't talk about is the need for identification for officers. We cannot have people showing up in masks, not having
Mhm.
a badge.
Yes.
And this is as close to hijacking as, I don't know who is arresting me here. I don't actually know if I'm being arrested if that happens. So we basically have in front of us the many different things that are, where do we want to stand as a community? I know we want to stand somewhere as a community, all of us, timing wise, option wise, but what do we stand for today? And I understand that we don't want to stand out as attract attention, but we're also projecting a message that is respect dignity of people. Okay. I'm not against people having immigrated and not breaking the law, but people also have made lives and have contributed to our community, and there needs to be a due process.
Yeah.
And so how do we express that?
We just had one final comment
Sure.
about signs now that we brought it up and we're going to talk a little bit. I would want to be very careful and strategic about not providing people with a false sense of security to say something like ICE can't be here by ordinance. Because from what I've heard is ICE can't be here by ordinance for civil enforcement, but for criminal enforcement, they can do whatever they want. Is that correct? Well, not whatever they want, but they can be here.
Subject to the Fourth Amendment.
Sure. But I don't want to give people a false sense of security that they can't enforce activity here. And then Lake Bluff becomes a center for people to feel safe. And really, it's only for civil enforcement, not for criminal enforcement.
Yes, and I think there's a fine line in providing a false sense of security to saying it's a free for all. There needs to be a line somewhere to say, no, we stand for due process. We stand for dignity of people. We stand for, and we define what we stand for.
Thank you, Regis.
Yeah, thank you. So should we,
I wanted to ask a question about the masking, required unmasking. Has that been tested, and others have put that into their ordinances?
A few, and I can look more closely at it. I'm skeptical about the enforcement of that. That's, local government telling the federal government what uniform to wear in some respects. But I'm just saying, so the answer is, I don't know if there's a court decision on it. I can check and kind of look into it legally. I have not done that yet.
What
I
about,
find that very interesting. Actually, that seems tangible to me. And it may be that it's no law enforcement officer, unless in the case of pandemic, is permitted. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me to not permit masks. I don't know. But, I'm interested in that because those videos that we've seen of other communities are chilling.
what about the need to provide a sign, a notification sign saying that this is an ICE immigration officer or an immigration officer or any other agency forcing people to say, no, this is what I represent, as opposed to no sign? Is there a standing on that?
Same issue with the issue that Trustee Ryder just said. I don't know whether or not we can dictate to the federal government how they enforce immigration laws. We're dictating to them, you can't commandeer our property, our resources, our employees. But these requirements are proactively going here. And I just need to, it's of a different nature.
I mean, would think that the state might have thought of that at this point, if it could be done.
Right, it's
Don't
not
you
in the
think?
Trust Act. Now, maybe they didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Trust Act was, almost 10 years ago,
17, right?
Yeah,
Trump.
yep.
So what we're saying is we can establish a limit on village property, village parking lots and public park and open spaces. That's something we can put, from what I understand. We cannot put a limit on the need for identification. This is to be checked.
Yeah, I'm gonna review that. Yep.
The, can we require any due process, or this is above our,
The Constitution sets, the Illinois and the federal government sets what's due process. It's not enforcing our laws. These are federal laws that are being enforced.
Got it.
So,
Peter.
and the federal government is required to provide due process. They have that requirement.
Can we require that any arrests in Lake Bluff be booked in Lake Bluff? We cannot?
I don't think so.
I mentioned I read, I think this is Highland Park, I don't remember which community it was, the Illinois Accountability Commission, and enabling our village administrator to have the authority to report any abuse to our state for, is that a thing you guys are interested in?
I would say certainly.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what she said.
We, in the memo from Peter, one community or several communities had asked their village or town manager to specifically report abuse or behavior to the Illinois Accountability Commission because I think the governor a couple of weeks ago said that we would establish a database of bad behavior so that we could actually act upon it retroactively.
The only thing I would add to that, Chief Simzinski and I had a conversation about that. I think it was Evanston, the mayor had made a statement. I don't know if it worked its way into their regulations yet, but the idea that they were going to dispatch a police supervisor to any call, if they got a call for 911 because of enforcement activity going on in their community or city, for the sole purpose documenting it. And that's what they were going to go to calls. Matt and I talked about, is that something that we could even do with the amount of, at any given moment? And like, well, there could be as many as 4, as few as 2 officers on duty. And do we have the capacity to do that? And we thought not all the time. And maybe very limited under certain circumstances. So I guess to that point, the idea of can we actually do that stands to, the test of time. Can we do it? Not sure yet, if that's exactly what you were looking for, but the idea of if we are called, which I think happens pretty frequently in these other communities, is that they get a 911 call if they see ICE enforcement occurring. And if we can get there on time and at the scene, then there will be some captured through the body cams and the police vehicles as well. But
It was going to be my
Oh,
next
long
question
percent,
in terms of
long.
resources.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the last thing we talked about was signage and Trust Act expanded to Trust Act expanding to all village employees as opposed to only law enforcement. What do you guys think? Is there something that is you want added to that or just removed from that?
Yeah, I agree with Susan's broadening it and making it clear.
Okay.
I did have one additional question, but sorry to, don't mean to interrupt. I wanted to ask you, what would be the circumstances under which ICE could obtain license plate information from Flock,
They can't, we do not disclose that to them. So it is specifically.
criminal or civil?
So criminal would be, again, criminal is a different thing, but we don't do any part of any part of immigration enforcement. So, what is the actual warrant for? Is this a criminal warrant or is this immigration?
So it would have to be a court warrant,
Court warrant.
and it would have to specifically request this information or identify this particular information, or what else would ICE need to do to garner our cooperation by providing license plate?
We would put that through our legal. We would put that through.
We'd call Peter.
Yeah,
Okay.
Peter or Larry, probably Larry Larzern too. And we'd work through that, because we don't share information with immigration enforcement. So what is the criminal warrant? What is it for? That's the big part of it, right? What is the effect?
Yeah. Hopefully it would have to be imminent danger to a person before the crime would be.
can we be compelled to do that, Peter?
Compelled to, by criminal warrant?
Yeah.
I would think from a criminal warrant, yeah, for the last 2 weeks of data.
Under the Trust Act, participate, support, or assist with federal immigration agent enforcement actions unless presented with a federal criminal warrant or otherwise required by federal
There you
law.
go.
Yeah. Glad we only have it for 2 weeks.
Regis, I want to go back to a couple of things. I'd like to address personnel, which I think you've captured. We've addressed property. We haven't addressed other resources or other assets, other maybe village vehicles or things like that. So I'd like to at least address them if we're going to put it in a ordinance so that we can respond to the residents who asked the question.
Is this a consensus on including resource such as vehicles besides people, all people from a village, all spaces, that is green space and all that, so vehicles, such as if somebody wants to borrow a fire truck, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I would try that. Okay, so it's a consensus on that.
And then my last thing, Regis, is on page 2 of the memo from Peter and Drew. Discuss related matters to consider. I assume now's not the appropriate time to talk about it, but will you be scheduling time to talk about page 2?
Yes.
Just not today, not now?
It seems, yeah, we've run out of time. so.
Okay.
So from asking the board on this, do we have somewhat of a consensus on everything we talked about, and do we have enough direction to Drew at this point? I think we have given something quite nebulous, quite fuzzy, but there's still a good envelope
Right.
around that. Do you feel comfortable?
I think I have clear direction on how to revise the ordinance.
Okay.
Great.
Any more last comment from the board? I should ask for public comment.
Yes.
Yes. Do we have anybody in the room who would like to make a public comment?
Again, Peter White, 400 East Sharon Place. I'd like to clarify some of the comments that the trustees made in the last meeting along the lines of your president's report. President Charlot, you said and I quote here, you're interested in an executive order to protect at-risk Lake Bluff families from ICE. Can you share what you mean by at-risk?
What I had in mind at the time, and I don't think I should answer that actually, but what I had in mind is people have been doing targeting of people with a skin that is not white, indiscriminately of being American or non-American. And that's what I was referring to.
Okay. And what did you mean when you said protecting? What do you mean by protection?
I'm not answering that.
You made the statement on the record. Okay. So you don't know what protecting means. We'll move on. Several people have mentioned, and you in particular, that you've had communications. Where are they in the record? Because I was unable to find them. You specifically mentioned emails. Wouldn't that be part of the record for this discussion?
This is not a public hearing, so the trustees are free to communicate with each other.
Mhm.
Okay, but
There's no
Anything that-
requirement that emails be included in the
I
record.
did not. The part of my normal communication with trustees is I take my phone and I call people to say, how do we feel this week?
okay, so we don't know the magnitude of community import. I think input at this point in time. And you said you were personally attached to a 70-year-old man in Waukegan as supporting the need for this ordinance. I was unclear what personally attached meant.
No, I'm personally attached to the example of
The example.
three grown-up men tackling to the ground a 78-year-old in the street because they thought that person caused a trouble, a danger.
Understood. Trustee Freed, you mentioned Lake Bluff School District families were impacted.
Mhm.
Do you know factually that those families were Lake Bluff residents rather than from Knollwood or unincorporated Lake Bluff?
The person that I was discussing it with explained that there have been Lake Bluff families who have had family members who are impacted. Now, whether those family members live in Lake Bluff or Knollwood or Gurnee or elsewhere, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But that Lake
Thank-
Bluff families have been
Yeah,
impacted.
thank you for a clear answer. So attendees to the school district have been impacted, whether the residents of Lake Bluff proper is unknown.
Yeah, to me,
Okay.
it's unknown, yeah.
Trustee Fisher, I completely agree that local government should be at the heart of government. I'd also share with the board here that should represent the entire community and not just what appears in some cases, and this is not the only one, minorities' interest. Trustee Fisher, you said, and I quote, "If we are always concerned about the targets on our backs, the bad guys win." In this case, in reference to the discussion that you were having, who are the bad guys?
I think it's pretty clear what my comment meant. I'm a family member of Holocaust survivors, and a big part of my personal and family experience is everybody stood by and watched and didn't do anything. Now, what we're watching now happening is a lot of people who are appropriately in this country are being taken.
And who are the bad guys? I understand the
I
historical
know exactly
reference.
who I mean, so I'm gonna stop
Say it.
talking now.
Say it.
Oh, I don't need to, sir.
Then I'll say it for you. You believe the federal government and the ICE people are the bad guys.
Can you please stop? This is not a
I'm moving on.
a two-way communication. This is, you make a public comment.
I wanted to get clarification on what was said, and that's perfectly acceptable. So just looking at,
Actually, I'd like to just say something. The way public commentary works is actually, we don't have an obligation to interact with you. It's your opportunity to speak, public
right,
speech.
then I'll go on speaking.
Good.
So the population of Lake Bluff is 6,000 people. The Hispanic population is about 194 according to the 2020 census. That's about 3.5%. And the whole ICE immigration is primarily, as we know, targeted at the Hispanic population. Just making a broad assumption that 60%, 2/3 are here legally with no issue, that leaves 66 people that are presumably at risk. I would say that this is, by any definition of a social issue, which this board has used many times, this is not a social issue. I think it's a political statement that is being attempted to be made. ICE had, or I don't know what need ICE would have, or DHS, for a public staging area in Lake Bluff when they have 1,600 acres up the road that the governor was just nice enough to pave down Sheridan Road. They don't need Lake Bluff. And we don't have a special events flag policy that's been festering for how many months? Let's deal with that, because that affects everybody in the community first, right? We want clear definition of the special events and the flags, rather than focusing on 1% of the residents. Some people have been questioning transparency. So I would suggest that this ordinance, because it's not by any definition a social issue, be published in the Lake Bluff email in its entirety.
Can I
Go
stop you
out
for a
public
second?
comment. Yeah.
So I didn't take the time when you started talking, but I would
Yeah, I'm
like
wrapping
to,
up.
can you please make your point?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
So my question to the village board is, are you willing to do that for additional impact? And that is publish the full ordinance in the body of the Friday updated email. And finally, I'd like to know the costs that that the village, what it'll cost the village for the research on this issue from our village attorney. Now, having said that, I'm strongly in favor of an ordinance, but I think it should be simple and straightforward. Something along the lines of, in light of DHS, Homeland Security, or an ICE, the village supports its residents, the village follows state law, and the village follows federal law. I think anything more is going on a slippery slope. Just because somebody else does it doesn't mean we have to do it. And let's stay out of politics and support our community members very simply and very directly.
If I may, I just would like to circle back and just clarify, because
Please.
I think the important piece is, and Rafi and I had a nice discussion about this. Just because you are a federal employee doesn't mean you are above the law. And what we're seeing is, and what I'm referencing, the bad guys are the people who are not abiding by the federal laws that they are supposed to be acting under when they are taking people off the streets.
That would apply to anybody.
So.
Yeah.
Citizen,
Yes,
There.
exactly.
police chief.
Please.
I know.
Sorry.
But you are right. It would apply to chief.
Yeah.
It would apply to all of us.
I have no issue with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I'm so pleased
The
that
bad-
we are actually in agreement on,
So the bad guys are the ones breaking federal law.
correct.
I don't have an issue with that.
Right.
But not all of them are. And
Nobody has
you
said
can't
that.
say because one bad apple, the whole.
No,
barrel's
but
bad.
we do have an obligation as leaders to call it out, because if we don't, then they will keep doing it.
Of course.
So I think what we're doing here,
Balance.
I mean, you just said that you're in agreement with an ordinance, which is very exciting to me. So,
Simple ordinance.
no, but sometimes simple to you is different than simple to us and what our lawyer will advise. us
Got
to
5
do.
lawyers sitting up here, so it's not going to be simple.
Well, I'm not drafting, but
Thank you.
So, yeah, it's
no, I
okay.
think it's great. We're in agreement.
We do this for our citizens.
Hey, Peter,
We
you need to
adhere.
move on.
Yes, thank you.
This is the end of our meeting and I still have to see people online. Thank you so much. Drew, do we have anybody online?
Anyone participating in tonight's committee of the whole meeting via the Zoom call who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand now and you can be recognized.
Okay.
Hearing none.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for your comments tonight. Peter, thank you for your comments tonight. Could I please have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you so much. It is 7:02.